Hey everyone, my name's Gunther and welcome back to another episode of Ottawa Zoo where we finally tackled the moose, which in my books is like the most iconic Canadian creature. Now, you are going to see quite a few jump skips on this particular episode, more so because this is actually quite of a long build for me. There was quite a few new things that I've never really done in Planet Zoo, which meant that there's a lot of trial and error. So you're going to see a lot of that via jump cut. So I do apologize in advance. And my feedback for myself is to make sure you're better at creating what you want and focusing on what you want. Maybe I need to be a little bit more intended. I would love to hear what you guys want to see in speed builds, like what most is important to you. If it's like interior, exterior, foliage, things like that, let me know because that'll help to shape what I focus on for you guys. Now, we're reusing a lot of elements from previous episodes. You can see that rock wall. We actually reused the barrier from our grizzly habitat, which kind of makes sense because I want to keep the entire theme of this area moving forward. So we want to have the same barriers because it's all going to be one big flowing path. Now, everything is about planning in Planet Zoo, and you can kind of see it. I have a plan on the ground, and I'm putting up walls and stuff like that because this is going to help me to understand where I want things. It's going to help me to understand where I want to necessarily put walls, barriers, things like that. And this barrier is a perfect example. So the idea behind this is I wanted to create something that was going to be a little bit more natural, probably would be something we would see out in the wilderness or near a forest or on the edge of a forest, especially coming up to like some pasture land. So imagine the moose is in a pasture and this barrier is actually going to prevent them from leaving this designated area. Now, this is only step one. Of course, we do need something a little bit more because we want to break up all those sight lines. So we're going to add in some trees, lots of trees. And then on top of that, we're going to add in some rocks. This is going to help to break up all that flat ground, add in some additional foliage, some bushes, some terrain paint, some trees, and lastly, some water. And we pretty much have an exterior of our habitat completed. Now, the rest of this episode is pretty much just going to be architecture and interiors because there's some really big interiors that we're working with. And maybe that's part of the issue, which is I've made maybe some interiors that are too big. So again, that entire idea of making something too big is rearing its ugly head again in Planet Zoo. But starting with our backstage area, I'm definitely going with a stall style, almost like it's a barn for horses. And I realize moose are not horses. That makes sense. But I like the idea behind it. So I went with these custom wood, hardwood fences, really just to kind of create some designation between the different stalls. Now, one stall is going to be larger than the rest, and that just makes sense. Part of the reason why, and I like to think of it, it's kind of like a birthing stall. So when you have moose, they are quite tall, they are quite big. And then once they have a calf, they're going to need a lot of additional space. So the third stall is going to be larger. It's going to accommodate the mother and the calf for that particular reason. So that's the entire idea behind it. Now, on top of that, in an effort to make sure that it's going to be as realistic as possible in terms of what I've built, because I realize not everything is realistic, I've even made sure that the gates are the correct size that if they were to kind of roll shut, they would actually fit the entire build. Now, again, we're utilizing that technique from Sparrow's video, which is usually utilizing some gutters to kind of create the runs and then adding in some of the cap pieces, just really to kind of denote where the stall doors are going to go. Now, in order to get the moose to actually utilize their stalls, I also added in these hanging grazer feeders, which kind of like carry over the stall walls. And I think that's kind of a little bit added more realism, but it also drives them into the stalls, which is really cool. So you're going to see them hanging out there from time to time. Now, up next was really just to add on a door that's going to separate the exterior from the interior of our habitat. And I do want to acknowledge before I talk a little bit about this, the change in the texture on the back walls. I went with this log wall because I wanted to create something a little bit more natural. I realized at the time, probably not the best thing to do. So you're going to see me switch it back. I do want to acknowledge it, but that's part of the idea of building this on the fly, which is we're going to experience and try new things. So going back to the barn door, the important thing for me anyway is making sure that it's actually going to fit and be as realistic from a size perspective as possible. I don't want to create things that are too big or too small. Again, you're going to see this ugly head rear itself again later in the episode. But these barn doors actually fit. So if they were to swing shut, they would actually fit correctly within the entire build. So I think that's important for me anyway. Now, when it comes to creating these barn doors, super easy. Really, all it is just taking some of the thin wood planks and then stacking them on top of each other. I used some of the thicker square beams to create the door portal and then added in some hinges. Now, for something that's shockingly few part-wise, I actually really like how it worked. I even added this little cross beam, which has helped to support the door, things like that, because moose are quite big, so we want to make sure that we have things that are going to survive. Now, things you're not going to see happen in this episode are just going to be some things like grind that I added to it, but you're going to see that at the very end. Now, I am going to say we are going to do a live tour, but this may actually be one of the last live tours that I do on the channel. More so because I would rather do one bigger tour of an entire area once we've completed it. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to focus on adding in some cinematic shots and stuff like that. But as I get better and more comfortable at playing Planet Zoo, things are going to change. So that's more food for thought for myself, and I wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up. So if you have any feedback for me on how that would work out, let me know, because that's how I improve. That's how everybody improves. Now, we've moved on to the final build for this episode, which is going to be this education/viewing station for the moose habitat. And in fact, we actually kind of go in and add a few other things because we have such a large space to work with, which is what I mean by sometimes we build too big, and I think this is a perfect example of that. Now, the iconic feature for this entire viewing station is this slanted 45-degree window glass. I'm really happy. I've never built anything at a slant like this before, so I'm really excited to see how this turned out. Hopefully you like it. Hopefully you learned something from it, because it was super easy to build, but I think it was super daunting at the same time because I've never done it before. So, of course, you're always encouraged, and I encourage you to think outside the box and maybe try some new tactics and things like that you are not familiar with, just to stretch your skills. And that's the important thing, and that's what I love about Planet Zoo. Now, of course, you're not going to see the full build of this building, more so because you would just be here for a very long time watching me build, and I don't think you want to do that. Now, if you do, let me know. Perhaps maybe I'll upload like an unedited version of it that you can watch in all of its ugly glory. You can see all the mistakes and whatnot, which would be very interesting. So let me know if you would like to see something like this. But in order to fill in the interior, which we have a rather large space, there's a few ways to do it, and I was talking with some people, and a huge shout out to Blob for giving me some ideas and sharing his build that helped to kind of inspire me to build my interior. So if you'd like to see really cool interiors, really cool builds, I 100% encourage you to check out Blob's channel. He has some amazing builds. You're going to see a link up in the top right hand corner to go check that out. Now, I really like the way this angled viewing station looked, so I felt the need to add it in on the top half. And this actually gives us the opportunity to add in some additional lighting, some additional skylights, which encourages so much more natural light within this entire build. Originally, I went with a pretty aggressive angle, but I learned my lesson and I went with a much more relaxed angle would be maybe the best way to saying it, which just gave us these little openings for some windows on the front, and I actually mirrored it on the back, but it also gave us these really cool skylights. And initially I went with like these 3 4x4 meter windows, but I did break it up a little bit. I added in some 2 meter windows, and you're gonna see that happen. Now, you have to keep in mind that your zoo is traditionally open during daylight hours. You're not open at night typically or very often. So this encourages more natural light within the zoo, and it just looks a lot nicer. I'm actually a fan of natural light or white light as opposed to yellow light. I'm not a huge fan of yellow light. Even in my house, I've replaced a lot of the bulbs with white light bulbs. My partner may not like them, but I find that they actually work significantly better. So knowing that, added in a bunch of natural light sources throughout this entire build, and then I capped everything off with these wood beams, and you're seeing them kind of pop up, use them a lot in the shelter as well, and I'm a huge fan of how this look just kind of flows through the rest of the zoo. So we went with a lot of the square, thicker beams, we went with some of the thinner beams, and probably one of my most iconic pieces within this entire build. Now, there is a downside with working with such large buildings, which is really, you just have so much interior space, and I really don't know what to do with it. You could do a lot with interior space, and I just really don't know if I'm that great with it just yet, which is not a skill I've unlocked yet. So maybe this is an opportunity for me to learn, and you're going to hopefully see more in future episodes where I get better at building interiors. But I digress, because the important thing here is it gave us an opportunity to add in 3 exhibit animals to our moose lodge, which really just allows us to finally finish off on one of the missions from the very beginning of opening up this franchise. And it'll be the first time I've actually added these types of exhibit animals on the channel. The only other exhibit animal I've added was actually the bat, which was in another zoo, and it was actually a walkthrough exhibit, which is still a really cool thing. Now, in order to break up the very flat walls, I did have the opportunity to create these little nooks that you saw me put together, and I like to envision that they're going to be really cool places for you to find some educational equipment. Now, speaking of education, it's time for us to really quickly put together a moose education sign and really just use the Australia pack of all things to create this really cool, iconic wood education sign. Now, on top of that, I also added in a restroom, and this should hopefully drive some of our guests to this section of our zoo, because my fear is that they're not necessarily going to want to hang out here. The view might be better from the outside, and this is going to be one way for us to drive them into this building. Now, there is a lot of interior work that did happen off camera, and you're only really going to see a little bit of it, just the surface, really. But I really hope that you've learned something from this, and maybe it's encouraged you to build your own interiors, things like that, and go really extravagant, because they can be really fun to work with, if daunting to say the least. Now, one of the last things I really wanted to put together were these doors to get into our moose lodge. And I totally did not realize that they've introduced a new door, which is this glass door. And I love the way this looked. I've always wanted to have a glass door. I find glass doors look super iconic within zoos. You want to be able to see where you're going if you're ever going into these types of buildings. And just creating this giant opening is not going to look the greatest. So really quickly, I slapped some metal beams together and then along with the glass doors to create these 3-door entrance. And I closed the middle one, so it just gives a little bit of additional variety. Now, the last thing really is to kind of put together our Moose Lodge sign. And I love the idea of creating a sign that's going to be offset or surrounded by some blacks, almost like it's like highlighted. So really easy. I created Moose Lodge and then I just made one part and then copied it back and forth. And I got that nice, really cool black border. Of course, I wanted to add a little bit of a moose feel to it, so I added some additional grass signs as well as the moose sign. Sunk it all down a little bit because I really just want a hint of that grass, but we've kind of created our iconic Moose Lodge. Now, if you've made it this far in the episode, we've hit the end of our speed build, and it's really going to be time for us to jump into our live tour. But before we get there, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody who's provided feedback and helped me to grow as a Planet Zoo builder. Really could not have done it without you guys. Your support has been super valuable. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of that. It's really helped me to be better, and I could not have done it without you. So without further ado, let's dive in to our live tour. It is time for that live tour of our new moose habitat. There's quite a bit to kind of show. We're going to start off with our staff area, but you're going to notice some things working on in the background, and I just want you to ignore them because think of it as a teaser for the next episode of Ottawa Zoo, which I'm really excited about. But as we kind of head up into the backstage area, which will be our first place to check because it's way on the other side of our habitat, we have some double paned windows, which I think this is a perfect example as to why wouldn't want to have any of those antlers maybe scrape up against the glass and crack it. So maybe we would kind of cheap out on that really thin tempered glass and kind of go for this like double paned glass instead. My goodness, they are huge. Would not want to run into a moose in the wilderness, that's for sure. Now, as we kind of head into the backstage area, nothing too fancy. We have our keeper's hut, which you can see kind of right here, and then like a little kitchen area, foliage area, kind of everything you would need to kind of keep this area running. Some additional storage, and then a bunch of windows for you to observe the moose from a distance and safely, because they are huge. I kind of just saw one exiting the area. But this is the backstage area, and I gotta say, I love all of these stickers, the grime and grunge stickers and stuff like that. It definitely adds a lot of additional realism to the backstage area. It kind of makes it look like it's been dirty, maybe hasn't been cleaned recently, which I can appreciate. It would not be something I would want to clean on a regular basis. We've added some hay bales, kind of getting ready for them to feed and stuff like that. And I love these little hanging feeding stations. And they just have kind of how they hang over the pen. So we, if they were all kind of locked in their pens, we would be able to swap out their feeding hangers without having to really worry about a whole lot. So that's the backstage area, and then as we kind of head out into the actual habitat itself, I think this is a perfect view of our new Moose Lodge. You can see off in the distance, and then a lot of foliage work, very minimal, but at the same time kind of full. I love the different use of foliage, just kind of giving it a little bit of more of that foresty look. I'm really happy with how this turned out. And we have room for 3 moose, but hopefully our herd will grow. Oh, I think we're at 4. My apologies. But hopefully we will grow our herd sooner rather than later. But we're not here to take a look at the backstage area. Let's take a look at the rest of the habitat. Now, I mentioned in the commentary for the actual speed build that this might just be like one of our last tours, and I think we'll do a few more tours, but I'm gonna kind of lean a little bit more into some more just cinematic shots, so you can kind of just observe the animals in their natural habitat, or as natural as they can be with this entire area. But this is the main viewing area. We have a nice path, lots of foliage blocking some sight lines. It really kind of feels like you're in the forest. And as you look out, you're going to notice probably the fence is a little too low. That's on me. We're going to pretend there's a bunch of signs like right here telling people not to lean over into the habitat. We would not want to, touch or play with the moose. They are wild animals. But look, oh my goodness, look how tall they are. And then as we kind of like head in, lots of additional educational signs, and you're going to notice a building kind of off in the distance. Not so much off in the distance, but this is going to be part of our next build, and I can't wait to show you more of this, and this is going to be the only teaser you're going to get of it. So take a look while you can, and stay tuned into the channel. You might see some additional teasers kind of popping out, but I do love this view. Look at that mountain off in the distance. This is a really cool place. I would love to see this as an actual zoo. But we're here to talk about Moose Lodge, and there's been a lot of work that happened. And I kind of want to share what happened a little bit on this, because as we enter in, there's a lot happening here. And this looks really good. I think the first time I kind of finished, I wasn't really happy with the interior. We went back and redid everything, and I'm much happier with what we've accomplished here. And there's quite a bit for us to chat about. But really, it's very educational focused, and we kind of have like a little terrarium, so we can kind of see some plants that we would see in their natural habitats for the moose. Lots of educational statements and stuff like that. Again, huge shout out to the Lion Pack. I love what he's done with all these signs, and they're super helpful. Also, thank you to the color select option. It's made modifying these super easy. And then I've gone through and added quite a few things. So we have 3 habitats. We have one for a tree frog, we have a bullfrog, and I believe we have a turtle. So 3 exhibits, which are the first exhibits we've placed in this entire zoo. And then I love these little headphones. These came from Sparrow. Thank you very much, Sparrow, for these headphones. They're perfect, and you can the idea is that you can kind of come up and you can hear the sounds of the tree frog, or sounds of their natural environment, things like that. I've also gone through and added these little banners, and they're actually from the Aquatic pack. And I've sunken them down, and really I just wanted the grass to kind of give it that little bit more of a grassy feel and break up the walls because they were pretty empty. So I went through and added them just about everywhere. And then in these recessed alcoves, kind of just have some more educational content. Would love to maybe ramp and update this a little bit, maybe put some like custom educational content, but we're not quite there yet. I'm going to show you the extent of my custom signs, which you can kind of see are the banners I have, are Discover and Explore banners with the moose and the bear. I think it's fitting because our last few habitats were the bear and the moose. So we have some banners kind of just hanging out, letting people know that some of our key focuses in the zoo are to discover and explore. Then we have some more educational equipment for our turtle. Again, we have some headphones for everybody to listen. And then lastly, we have our bullfrog. And look at the bull, and there you go. Perfect. That was not planned, but there are some bullfrogs kind of hanging around, and I appreciate that. There's, I think we have 4 now. So lots of educational stuff, and I'm really happy with how that all turned out. We have our restroom for our guests, totally free, because I don't think anybody should have to pay for a restroom. And then we have our educational signs, and then we have the viewing station. And honestly, I love the idea of having like angled windows. I really like how this turned out. It's the first time doing something like this, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. And then again, lots of educational content. We have like a viewing screen, so it would kind of be an interactive screen. We could touch it and learn more about the moose. Again, you can kind of hear the sounds of the moose and whatnot. And then I feel like we have 3 stations, and they're pretty much the exact same. And the idea behind it is we want to have a bunch of guests kind of hanging around in here, listening to the sounds of the moose, learning more, getting some educational content, and just observing. And you gotta say how much like you love the moose. Like, look at that. Is he gonna scratch? Oh no, maybe too good to be true. And then it's that's about it. Now, the interior of this area did not look this good originally, and part of what really encouraged me to improve was I did my first live stream, and it was not really an intent. I did not intend to do a live stream. I was just kind of playing around with it, and then some people wanted to watch. And it really helped me with the interior of our seal exhibit, our seal pavilion that you can kind of see right there, and it made me want to go back and revamp this entire area. And I gotta say, this is like 30 times better than what it used to be. I'm really happy with how this turned out. It actually looks like a real education center. Lots of greenery. We have ivy hanging around everywhere. Lots of open windows. I gotta love the skylights and just education materials everywhere. And I am super over the moon with how this turned out. Hopefully you like this. Hopefully you learned some things. Hopefully you see some things that kind of worked out. And if you ever want to know how to do that, let me know, because it took me a little while to figure out how I could kind of get a really cool banner like this set up. Now that I've figured it out, definitely be prepared to see banners and just about everything, because I love the way this looks. So we're gonna have banners everywhere, various shapes and sizes, things like that. But in general, I'm kind of really happy with what we've achieved here. And of course, a lot of it is thanks to you guys. Now, of course, if you liked this episode, or if you're really liking the content, if you want to show your support, feel free to leave a like. Let me know what you thought the favorite part of this or how I could have improved this habitat was. And then, of course, feel free to subscribe. Subscribing does help me out, I'm not going to lie, but I don't want you to feel pressured to do so. Just you watching lets me know that I'm doing a good job, and I really appreciate that. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much for the support you guys have shown so far. And of course, as always, ciao for now, everybody.